So, hello everybody. Welcome to the part of 99 Percentile. This is the podcast which is going to change your life for the better. I am Manu Nicholas Jacob, your host, and we have a guest with us today, Maya Sadasivan. And today we are going to be starting off the podcast with a bang. So, Maya, can you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Manu, when you ask this question, tell me something about yourself and what you do. I remembered when we ask our engineers in the company that I work with, tell me something about yourself. And the first statement is, I'm an engineer.
Okay.
All right. And I would like to revamp that frame for us today. So I would like to start by what is something about myself. I have been born and brought up as a Fauji. I come from an army background. And why I mention this is because today, when I think about your question, I realize that my core essence has been determined by the fact that I have been born and brought up in an army family.
Okay.
So that is extremely close to me. My moral compass comes from that. Having said that, I love traveling. I love reading books. I love exploring music. And I also think that having grown up as an army officer's daughter, humor is something that defines me. And then about the second part of your question as to what do I do, I have moved through life as a journalist, as a teacher, and today I craft leadership development programs for the company that I work in.
Okay,
So that is what I do today.
Yes, that's really interesting as an answer. And the way you phrased the whole thing was also really different from the other guests I've had earlier, and that's a really interesting and nice new change, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, what do you do in a normal day? Can you describe your typical day in your typical role, in your current role?
Do you want me to start at 5 a.m. or do you want me to start at 9 a.m.?
Well, well, that's interesting. But yeah, let's start at 5 a.m.
All right.
Yeah.
So I start at 5 a.m. and I think the first 10 to 15 minutes is my rev up time. So I look at that 10, 15 minutes of having ginger tea, some meditational music, and a spot in my home which looks at green. And that is my me time that revs me up for the rest of the day.
Okay.
And I can tell you, Manu, that 15 minutes is the only island of peace I have in the rest of the day. After that, it's a mad rush. You can imagine cooking, packing, getting ready, rushing across the road, and then going to the office.
Once you reach office,
I find that I always ensure that my day is very systematic and well planned. More because I have innumerable stakeholders that are involved. So a regular day for me, Manu, would be training. I would have training sessions, and followed by the training sessions, I would usually have a few meetings with stakeholders, understanding training needs of different business units that encompass our company, and creating new modules. And then, of course, the mad rush back. Having said that, I have noticed that during the online work from home space, the mad rush has reduced a little, but the 9 to 6, trust me, is as hectic as ever.
Yeah. Also starting off in the beginning, the 5 a.m., the kind of me time which you described is interesting, and I believe that most of us need to have some kind of a me time, because that basically happens for me maybe in the towards approximately 7 p.m. 7:30 p.m. after I finish all my classes for the day. I kind of go outside. I kind of go outside, and that's kind of my me time. That's kind of the time where I look at the grass outside, look at the cypresses outside, and that's the time where you actually cool down from the rest of all the work of the day. You kind of cool down at that time. That is really important, yes. And having that at the beginning of the day is interesting, as you start off the day with a bang as such, yes. And so you have a good amount of experience in your various fields, and is if there was one thing which you would have wanted to tell your former self, what would you have wished you would have known when you started off in the beginning?
It's interesting that you asked this. Recently, I came across a little story, and I resonated with that story a lot. There's a training program, and there are two engineers in that training program. One is a man, one is a woman. And after the training program, they go back to their boss, and the boss is like, "Okay, you've done this fantastic training program. I'm going to give you a new role." And the response of the male engineer is, "The training program, I picked up only 60%, but that's okay. While I'm working, I'll pick up the rest of the 40." Whereas the female engineer, "Oh my God, the training program gave me only 60%. How will I do this job without the rest of the 40%? I need to pick up the rest of the 40%. Only then can I take up this job." So the question you asked me reminds me that when I started on this journey to be a leadership coach and a leadership trainer, I always had this feeling that 40%, unless I get that 40%, I will not be good at what I do. But today I realize that 40% is the application of that 60%. And so, yes, for anyone who's starting on a similar journey, my advice to you, what you know is your strength. Applying that in real time is what makes it stronger.
So I think that's basically the idea that starting now is better than starting at a later date where you may know more, but by starting now, you will actually get down to doing those things. And
Absolutely.
since starting is the most difficult part, getting that over should get the rest of it easier. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and over the course of your experience and over the course of your career, you have had many successes, and I'm sure there would have been some failures as well. How did you get over those, and what kind of motivated you to push on forward?
I haven't really grown up with this word failure.
Okay.
And now that you ask me this question, and I think about it, all my childhood, the frame was always, "Oh, you were not able to do this. Okay, would you like to try another way of doing it? Or would you like to do something else?" This was the frame that I grew up with. I never really registered this word failure. And I'll tell you the first time that I came across this concept of failure. I was doing my degree, and there was this nemesis of mine called organic chemistry. And this, I had a full paper on biochemistry in my graduation, and I flunked this paper. And my parents were still saying the same thing. They were like, "Oh, what happened? You found the paper difficult? Okay, how shall we go about it?" The word failure was never used, but by the time I was in college, I was surrounded by people who ensured I never forgot that I failed.
No.
And the second thing that if you look at, by the way, so after I failed biochemistry, and then of course I worked my put my heart and soul into it, and I cleared it. And then when I did my next education level, I made sure that I picked up subjects that I would like. I would pick up subjects that I was curious about, if not like. And I pick up subjects that I don't mind working very hard on, whether I like them or not.
Okay.
And voila, I got a gold medal in my journalism from Pune University.
Great.
So yes, so these are the three things that Manu, that guided me. There is always a time in your life when you're doing something that you don't like, you don't feel like, and I think what you need to ask yourself is, can you be curious about it? And I find that actually helped me a lot to get over that aspect of failure and move into something that I can actually excel in.
And yeah, I think that is really important thing as well. For example, obviously, I do not have the same amount of experience as a person like you, but in 10th grade, I am absolutely in love with math and physics. So the math went really well. I got a 95. I wanted more, but I ended up with a 95. And the science didn't go really that well. The science, the physics was really good. Chemistry was okay. The chemistry was good. But one thing which pulled me down was the biology. It's simply the idea that, for me, the idea of memorizing something, the idea of mugging something up, does not vibe with my personality as such. And the ability to use logic and trying to overcome the sum over there is the thing which basically goes along with me. And the fact that you have to remember a lot of facts from the biology textbook, I think that was a kind of place which led to my downfall over there. But now in 11th grade, since I am working without biology, only math, physics, chemistry, I think I am doing pretty well. The 11th grade exams were pretty good, and right now the 12th grade has started as well. So I think also you mentioned that you must be curious about something which you are working on at that time. And that is also a really important thing, because unless you have interest in what you're doing and unless you're curious about learning more on that subject, it is really difficult to focus on that subject as such. So now, just as a broad question for which will really help our listeners out there, with the coronavirus pandemic going on, with the world which may change after this, what is something which you are really curious about right now?
The two words that come to my mind the moment you ask that question, one word is stoicism.
Sorry?
Stoicism.
Okay.
Are you stoic in the way you handle your circumstances? Uh, do you have a very emotional response to it, which can sometimes be irrational? Or do you have a response which says, "I understand the circumstance I am in. I analyze what is my plus and minus, and what is the next course that I need to take." So the stoicism is something that I have been exploring for the last few months as a concept. It is interrelated to how brave we are, and is our bravery rooted in understanding and accepting the circumstance rather than fighting the circumstance. So I think, Manu, the other day I happened to see on this news channel, there are people holding placards that say, "Give me liberty or give me COVID-19." That didn't make sense to me at all. For me, it's more like, okay, we have COVID-19. What is it that we can learn from this? What is it that we can do to ensure we are stronger and more resilient after this?
Yes.
So if I look at it, the word that comes to my mind is stoicism. That
Yes.
is what I'm curious about right now, and that is what I'm working on.
Yes, the ability to, after a problem as such, as COVID-19 can't be referred to as a problem, it's a global pandemic, but after a thing of this magnitude, or after any experience, the ability to learn faster, to have the ability to get back on your feet and get back into the field much faster is also a really important thing, which I think that,
And
yeah,
also, I think just now when you said the ability to learn, I think the ability to learn comes first if you accept the situation and the circumstance.
okay,
You need to accept, okay, we have this situation. Instead of going into these, vitrolic of this is a capitalist disease that has been created by capitalist people, and it is creating mass suffering. Instead of going into all these labels, if we accept the circumstance and then bring out from within us what we can do to overcome and move forward, perhaps that will work much better in our favor.
yes. And yeah, that is really important as well. And so along your way, you have mentioned that you were from an army background. I think your father was in the army.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so
Yes.
what are the, if I were to ask, if just as a simple question, what are the few values which you think have greatly helped you to advance in your career?
When you talk about values, I would say pride in self,
Okay.
where um, I see a lot around me nowadays where I hear parents and perhaps the older generation also telling children, ahankar is not good.
Mhm.
But in the process of ahankar not being good, I think as parents we are forgetting to instill in child a sense of pride.
Mm.
When they have worked so hard for something and when they have achieved, they deserve the pride. And so to have a very positive perception of pride, which will trigger more successes, that is one thing I believe I learned as a child growing up in the army. The second value that I imbibed in the army was with whatever little you have, live with style because you deserve it.
Okay.
I mean, Manu, we would not have sofa sets. I remember in my childhood, we had trunks. And on the trunk, we would put a blanket and then we would put a sheet and we would put a cushion and voila, style. So for me, I think that simplicity and the fact that just because you don't possess things doesn't mean you don't have to live with style. The concept of style within simplicity is the second value that I imbibed in the army. And the third value that I imbibed is a sense of discipline. And the fact that discipline actually gives me the flexibility rather than discipline chaining me. If you look at when we are in school, we all make timetables, and then we never follow the timetable. And somewhere down the line, I have always wondered when we make a timetable, just make sure that certain aspects of the timetable are non-negotiable, and the rest of the aspects are negotiable. Automatically, the timetable not only brings in a discipline but also gives you a flexibility.
Mm.
And this is something that I have learned growing up in the army, that a plan, a sense of discipline, being systematic and organized actually provides us with flexibility.
Interesting. And yes, and I think also one more reason why, well, we were people are much younger and they set up a timetable. For example, 2 weeks before the exam, we decide that we're
Yeah,
going to set up a proper timetable and not going to waste any time studying. It kind of overreaches, and you set a timetable of studying 14 hours a day when you've all through your life you've studied only maybe 2 hours every single day. And I think that is
very
also
true.
that is also a problem. And keeping tasks as in a few very important tasks as non-negotiable, and the other tasks as they can be moved around a little, though that is also really important. Yes.
True.
And so yeah, go ahead, you were saying something.
No, I'm going to ask you if you have made timetables.
Yes, the idea of my timetable is I do not have a time frame as such. I write down for example, 5 important tasks into a book. The book is not here right
Hmm.
now; it's in the other room. But I write it in a book, and as I go through the day, I cut out these tasks. So my aim is by late afternoon by early evening to try to finish off all of these tasks so that the evening is kind of relatively free. So that is basically my idea of how to plan out a day and try to finish the most difficult tasks. For example, if I have to do a pre-recorded session from the school, which is really long, and I also have to work on a relatively simpler course. The course goes down towards the latter part of the day, and this other hard video comes at the beginning part of the day. So simply because I can get it off done with the amount of energy I have in the morning. So that's the idea of a timetable for me.
Now that you mention it about energy, I have always wondered. I think that is very important that we need to know when is our high energy time or when is our brain alive time.
Mm,
Because at that time, in less hours, we can finish more.
mm,
And that is one thing, the brain alive time. And the second thing, when you were talking, it struck me was it's very important to understand our competence level in the task.
yes.
Okay, as a student, okay, with the complexity of this subject, now, for example, you might need less time to comprehend and apply a math sum vis-a-vis the species and the, generic, that, what is it called?
With
Which
diagrams.
species, which
Yeah.
genus, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
aspect, that might take a little more time. Yes.
Hmm.
So our competence level actually gives us a mantra towards what strategy to adopt to fast forward our work.
Hmm. Yes, and I
This
was
is something that struck me.
Yes, I was also, I've through the past year or so, I've been looking at various YouTubers who talk about how to structure your day, how to make the most out of your day, and things like this. And one person struck out to me. His name is Richard Uzi. He's a
Hmm.
he just got out of college like last year or so, and he is from UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. So the way he does it is that he goes to sleep every day at 7 p.m. So that's how early he
Okay.
goes to sleep, and he gets up every day in the morning at 3:30, and his most important tasks are over by 6:30 in the morning. And
Wow.
the amazing thing about that is in that time period of 3 hours, your productivity is boosted simply because there is no distraction around you. No one is going to be
Very true.
calling you at that time. None of your roommates, as such, are going to be asking you for any questions or anything like that. So I think, yes,
Mm.
as you said, kind of try to find the time which best you can utilize for that amount of work which you're doing. Yes.
Very true. Very true.
So, now, just of talking about people who I've been watching, are there any few important people, like three people who have really inspired you along your journey?
Mm. Inspired me.
Yes.
I think hands down, I wouldn't call it one person, but I would call the entire gang would be my family.
Okay.
I have, like, whether it is being very organized and systematic, which is my mother's forte, being very, very disciplined about money, that is my father's forte. I have been very inspired by these two. My brother is extremely motivational and very non judgmental. So I've been inspired to be non judgmental and motivational like my brother. My daughter has been very inspiring. She, from the, I think, second standard or third standard, she became environmentally conscious. And today she's done her master's in environmental sustainability and she's working in that field. And I'm like, whoa, that's called focus and commitment. So, hands down, I would say my family inspires. Uh, One person that I would like to mention is one Mr. Prem Nair. I happened to be working alongside him some years back. He works in the field of a corporate communication in terms of the website, the brochures, the mailers, everything. For him, taking pride in perfection and that triggering creativity is something that inspired me. The fact that creativity could be triggered if one seeks perfection. That is something I learned, and I still find it extremely inspiring when I think about it.
Interesting. Yes. So, now, over the our conversation, we have talked about people who have inspired you, how you prioritize your day, and how your from a young age, your the army background has greatly helped you in a various cases, as in the values and the kind of the mindset which it has imbibed you has greatly helped you in your career as well. So if there is any important advice you would like to give to our listeners out there, what would it be?
When you talk about those listening to our podcast,
Yes.
I think one of the most crucial pieces of advice that I would give is constantly work on your self awareness. Your self awareness will be the foundation to who you become. And it is a lifelong journey, Manu. One doesn't, one fine day get up and say, I've arrived. That doesn't really happen. At the same time, the more self aware you are, whether it is a challenging situation or a success situation that is waiting to be replicated, that self awareness gives you the strategies to either overcome the challenge or to replicate the success. So that is one area that I would really advise people around me to work on, self-awareness. The second thing that I would highly recommend, have varied interests. Just one single, I mean, like I gave the example of my daughter, she has a very single-minded devotion towards environmental sustainability. At the same time, there is art and culture that she's interested in. There's music, there's dance, there's books, there's doodling. There's so many other things that a person needs to be interested in because there are so many facets to us as human beings that it would be such a waste if we did not explore all these facets. So that's the second piece of advice I'd like to give. Explore all your multitude of facets. Um, and I'll tell you something, Manu. Maybe when you're young, like in school and college, and if someone says, let's sing or dance, and we are so awkward and embarrassed, oh my God, I can't sing, I can't dance. But today, at my age, if you ask me to sing and dance, I would be bindas and I would sing and dance. I wouldn't really care about what people think and say. And I so wish that when we were young, we had that kind of mindset where we let our hearts roam free without wondering what people are going to think and say, right? For me, these are two very important things. One is the self-awareness, and the second is the chutzpah to explore the multitude of facets that you have. You do these two, and I can assure you, you will live life, not just float through life.
That's great, and it's been amazing as in having you a guest on our podcast as well, and the amount of insight you have given, and the insights which our listeners and viewers out there which will get is also going to be amazing. So again, I thank you again for being on our podcast. So
The pleasure is mine.
yeah.